The Charons of Duet Night Abyss have it pretty bad. At best, they are oppressed second-class citizens, and at worst, they are taken horrific advantage of, sometimes even experimented on. The Solarians outright despise the Charons and see them as no better than animals or even filthoids. But where does this hate actually come from? I mean, are the Solarians just jealous of the Charons' powers and abilities, or is there a reason behind this deep-seated hatred? Well, as it happens, the conflict between the Charons and Solarians stretched back several thousand years, and there has been several key events building up the tensions we see in the story. So in this video, I'm going to share with you the long history of the Charons and Solarians. Before we dive deeper into this topic, let me just warn you, this video may contain some spoilers from the 1.0 main story. If you are not caught up yet or are still playing through it, then consider this your obligatory spoiler warning. As I mentioned earlier, the bitter relationship between the Solarians and the Charons started a long time ago. Even before the Hyperborean Empire was even a thing, tensions between the Charons and the Solarians was at an all-time high due to a continent-spanning war. Around 2000 years ago, during the Sacred Tower era, the Charons instigated a war against the Solarians. They slaughtered the Solarians indiscriminately and pushed them to the brink of extinction. Battles and skirmishes spread all across the continent and many died on both sides. It's not explained why the Charons did this or how the Solarians were able to push them back, but this war ingrained within both parties a deep-rooted hatred and wariness for the other. Another significant event occurred at the tail end of the Great Migration, an event in Atlasia's history where many from the Elysian Church left to occupy other regions of the continent. It involved the future emperor of the Hyperborean Empire, Galea, and was referred to as the Knight of the Lamenting Lake. The story goes that while exploring the northern regions of Atlasia, specifically the Cocytus region, Galea came across a few Charon tribes. Both parties clashed intermittently in several skirmishes, but it never broke out into total anarchy. Wanting to prevent an all-out war, Galea decided to broker peace with the Charons and propose an accord between their two groups. The Charons initially agreed, and a celebration was to be held at the Lamenting Lake to mark their newfound agreement, but the Charons, however, had other plans. Almost as if the Charons got inspiration from the Red Wedding, they instead attacked the Solarians at the feast. It was total chaos, and many Solarians died having been caught off guard, one of which was the brother of Galea, who died protecting him. Galea would then retreat from the region and into the southern Hyperborean plains. To be clear, the Hyperborean Empire had not yet existed at this time, and this was just the name of the place he had fled to. Over the next decade or so, Galea would unify the inhabitants of the plains, rebuild his army, and march back into the north. Here, he completely destroyed the tribes that once betrayed him and razed the fortress of Icelake Keep, which would later become the city of Icelake we see in the game. Once the dust settled, he was crowned as Emperor Dis I, and the Hyperborean Empire was born. Despite this experience, the first emperor of Hyperborea did not initiate a systematic purge of the Charons. Instead, he proclaimed that the Charons were children of the Hyperborea all the same and would fall under the banner of the empire alongside the Solarians. In this historical account, the first emperor had chosen peace and forgiveness over vengeance or retribution. To commemorate the emperor's benevolence, the people of Icelake celebrate the Silver Candle Carnival, an event we see occurring in-game. Speaking of benevolence, if any of you are feeling particularly charitable, consider checking out the channel. I mostly cover story and lore content for anime games, so if you're interested, then perhaps you could consider subscribing. Now, those two stories are the only historical accounts we currently have related to the clashes between Solarians and Charons. It's clear that the animosity between them has been deeply rooted from thousands of years ago through countless conflicts. However, this isn't the only reason Solarians might fear and even hate the Charons. You see, the horned and magic-wielding Charons have a unique biological tendency to, well, go berserk. I've talked about this in another video, but the Charons basically go through a magical puberty referred to as the Awakening. This process basically gives them access to their powers, and those that move on to the next stage are called daemons. However, there are a small percentage of them who experience what is called deterioration, a condition which has no cure and slowly kills them. When a deteriorating charon undergoes their awakening, instead of gaining powers, they become enhanced filthoids. They lose their rationality and go berserk, striking out at anyone and anything around them. To put it simply, each and every charon can potentially be a ticking time bomb, one that could become a monster with little warning. This is why the Hyperboreans take deteriorating charons super seriously, and the penalty for sheltering one is immediate death. Even within the story, there have been two characters directly impacted by deteriorating charons, but I won't spoil it for you here. So this makes it a little bit more understandable why others might fear the charons and outright avoid them, especially if your next door neighbor could suddenly turn into a vicious monster. Should a single individual experience deterioration and fly under the radar, tens or even hundreds of people may be at risk. Now, the last reason why I think the Solarians might treat the Charons rather poorly is simply because they are the majority. In the Hyperborean Empire, the Charons account for only 20% of the entire population, while the rest are made up of Solarians and some Lunarians. On top of that, the Charons are clearly superior to humans in nearly every way. They have better physical resilience, better resistances, and even magical powers. So perhaps in order to keep their positions in life, the Solarians treat them poorly so that the Charons never even consider rebelling or fighting for better rights. To be clear, I'm not saying that all Solarians are evil, but groupthink is a dangerous thing. Once one person normalizes the poor treatment of others and justifies it through their history or potential danger, everyone will eventually do it whether they agree with it or not. It becomes the norm, then nobody questions it. Whether this happens in other regions or cities is unclear, but with all the history the Charons and Solarians share, it's not really a big surprise why they are poorly treated in the Empire. Now, before I end this video, I want to discuss one last thing. Given everything you now know about their history, the deterioration condition, and the cultural norms of the Empire, is this treatment of the Charons justified? It's tough to say, to be honest. I mean, on one hand, the war where the Solarians were almost driven to extinction happened such a long time ago. But at the same time, you can sort of understand why the Solarians would want to avoid that from ever happening again. The Charons can also be a danger to others as well as themselves should they ever experience deterioration, but also it's not like they chose to be that way. I'm not defending the Solarians here, but there are complicated issues at play here that don't make it as simple as black and white. Of course, we have seen the darker side of things where the Solarians do indeed push the limits of what can be considered humane, with experimentation, poor living conditions, and overall crappy treatment of the Charons. But the Forsaken are also hinted to be capable of the same thing and have resorted to some rather extreme measures to get their point across. From the story and some of the lore background I've shared here, this is clearly not one of those stories where one party is good and the other is evil. There are Charons who are oppressed, but also Charons who work alongside the Empire. There are Solarians who torture and commit atrocities, but also those who are capable of compassion. What is interesting though is that in their own historical text, the first emperor openly accepted the Charons into his empire. So why have things changed so drastically if the emperor himself accepted them? Perhaps the historical accounts were just inaccurately written to show the emperor as benevolent. I mean, history is written by the victors, right? Or perhaps modern day Hyperboreans have completely forgotten this and revel in their elevated positions compared to the Charons. I know I'm going back and forth on this, but my point is that we just don't know enough at this point in time to say who is really the bad guy here, and I think that's partly the point of the story. We are shown two different perspectives, and perhaps instead of a black and white narrative, it's really all a murky gray. Perhaps once we see other regions and cities and the story develops a bit more, we can accurately gauge how well the Charons are treated, but for now, let's end it here. Do you think the Solarians are justified in their treatment of the Charons, or should they all face judgment? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found the video entertaining, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and as usual, have a nice day.